Paul Skuratowski and I met at the CEPS conference in May in Brisbane. And over the course of a couple of very pleasant days and very nice dinners, we got to talking about what was needed, because the speakers were saying the same kind of things. So Paul, who knows nothing about art, meets me, who knows nothing about police systems and is in this very kind of precious world of art history and images and big gold frames and people speaking in hushed voices in major institutions. So we decided that we would try and do what we could to actually get something going, to address some of the issues that kept coming up in the CEPS. Oh, thank you. Now I can't get in. I'm trying to take my watch off. All right, so this is a project very much in progress, but it's been a very steep learning curve, particularly for me, but very interesting. So it has been a marriage of convenience. So here we are. That's Paul on the wall, and that's me, a la Lily Palmer, about to take the artwork. I couldn't resist that image when I found it. It's from the 1937 film Morning Boys. But, you know, really no art historian should be without that image. All right, so I heard Simon talk or mention this phrase this morning, and it was one when I started to do some research about police and academy collaboration that really stuck in my mind, that it was all too often a dialogue of the deaf, and that's a paper from David Bradley and Christine Nixon. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. But for me, as an outsider, it really stuck, and even at this early stage in my kind of interface with the police, I thought that's exactly how it is. But what then appeared, if you kind of think about what Christine Nixon argued with the systematic deficiencies in the interface between police and police researchers, and that, you know, in the 80s she's saying that there is this new approach. And the one that obviously stuck is not the critical police research tradition, but that one which is driven by policy police research. Okay. Oh, what have I done? No, hang on, I'll do it up here. From the beginning. Okay, I won't use this one then. All right, so what is possible through a collaboration such as ours? And having worked on this now for 6 months, the first thing that we absolutely know is that research in this area in Australia is, apart from the work that Ken and Duncan have done, and Saskia, it's almost negligible. The only area that is really has become a kind of major ticket item is when art crime is applied to what has happened to the story of Indigenous art in Australia, and I'm damn sure the same thing is true in Canada with the work of Inuit artists. But what we found is that a combining of skills can enable both more lateral solutions to the problem, and also we found it value adds those already in place. But we've seen that it's actually much more effective when it's focused on a particular issue, such as that of art crime. What this process has done for both of us is to force us to think outside the normal institutional box. So, to the problem. And just very quickly, when I started going back to this and thinking about what we keep hearing about, the issue of art crime, particularly in Australia, and I've underlined this review from about John Conklin's book, but I've underlined what I think were the key issues that were being written about in 1994, and how much of them are still absolutely applicable today. And in fact, are you nodding, Ruth? Yeah. So the limited of the paucity on the research is then criticised because it's usually anecdotal, there is no statistical information, and so what you get too often is a simplistic common sense treatment. But, okay, so in 2012, art, crime and policing, has then anything changed since the first Australian combined attempt to look at this issue, which was in 1998, the Institute of Criminology Conference in Sydney, and I was there. On that occasion too, I think I was the only art historian. So when I looked back to my papers from that conference, the same things are said: the lack of hard data, the lack of systems, but the other element is that it's impossible to ignore and difficult to quantify is the resistance across some of the parties inherent in the art industry, like museums, galleries, dealers and auction houses. So what we have here is, you know, the never-ending circle. You can't apply for funding because it's impossible to quantify what you're going to be arguing for. There is no data. Then there's also no data, then you can argue for or enact change. For the police, it's not the main game. There are no specific policing strategies in place and no particular reason to change this and also the problematic prosecutions. There are very few results. In fact, I've just finished doing a chapter for a book for Saskia, and I think in the cases that I wrote about, they were nearly all, if the works were found, it was because there was a tip-off. None of them were actually solved by police. So again, we get the thing about research, and that in terms of academy funding to do this research, because none of the data is there to be able to argue for the need for it, it's almost a no before you begin. So this is the police voice. Art. What about art? Which is, I've become quite familiar with that. So the first thing to say is that the COPS data system, which is the one that's in place at the moment, is impossible to interrogate in terms of art crime. If there's a theft and art is stolen and there's a computer, the data is just about as likely to be entered under computer, and then 4 paragraphs down they might talk about paintings, even though the case in 2010 with one theft, the computers were worth $500 or something dollars, and the artworks were worth $2.5 million. The police that were in charge for that initial investigation had absolutely no idea of what they were dealing with. There are 9 different policing jurisdictions in Australia, and they don't like talking to one another. At the moment, police have little awareness of either the possible major monetary value or cultural significance of art. And the only way I've been able to actually push a conversation along is when I start talking about the Interpol figures. And then it's like, oh, really? So that's when I say art. What about art? So there are no police responsible specifically for art crime. It's simply larceny. A computer or a painting are treated the same. It's not their main game. And you can understand that. And then there's the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is, as far as I'm concerned, the insurance companies. Now, they play a vital, but usually almost invisible role in the investigation and resolution of art crime. They don't want anyone to really know what they're doing, and neither do their clients. But they are the ones, I now know, who hold the records. Okay, so the starting point for Paul's and my project was to accept that police can't do it all. So when art crime is so obviously not the main game of police in Australia, it's vital to recognise what is realistic and feasible. Also recognise the value of and work with policing at the operations level. And I'll talk about how we're going to resolve that later. There's evidence to support claims that when the task has a narrow focus and a specific aim, change in policing mechanisms is much more easily implemented and enacted. There is an urgent need for researchers under proper guidelines to access police records to further the collection of data on art crime in Australia. So I'm going to be very interested to hear what Ruth has to say. So, the project, I don't know how, it's a work in progress. What's the aim? Paul and I are working to both articulate so that we can argue later and implement both strategies and mechanisms to break this impasse between data, information and argument for change. So what we've done at the moment is we have actually found there is a database in New Zealand which the New South Wales Police are looking at, which is called SPY, and that is one that is partially funded by the private sector, and it's also one that is quite easily suited to load visual images. We will never get one like the Stolen Art Register in London that's a standalone. The best we can hope for is something that is flexible enough to be able to utilise art and other images. So then we need to facilitate action. One thing that has surprised me with talking with Paul and with other police is how nervous they are about bringing people in. They don't mind having expert advisors on a list, that's fine. But it's been a very cautious response to actually offering an expert committee of people who do not have vested interests, such as me. You know, I'm an art historian. Doesn't make any difference to me, you know, which works are being offered for sale or not sale. And Duncan and Saskia. It's not like we're a member of an insurance company or an art gallery board. Now, we've gone quite a long way with that because there is a precedent for that kind of committee work, although in the New South Wales Police it's to do with car rebirthing and retail theft. But anyway, it's there, so we can, without too much difficulty, hook onto it. What time did I start?
You have another 3 minutes.
Oh, 3 minutes, okay, good. All right, now the other thing, and this is where my little expertise comes in, is that I am writing a series of in-house police workshops on art crime. You know, trying to make it as sexy and glamorous as possible. And when the recently retired Deputy Commissioner of Police said to me, yes, but Pam, remember we're not producing art historians. And I said, yes, but let me tell you that the new head of the FBI art squad is an archaeologist, not a policeman, and that the FBI run a very good series of programs online. Have a look at them here. So this is going to be a way of actually beginning the process of letting the police understand that there is going to be a process available when art is stolen. The other issue which I found extraordinary and would never have occurred to me until I began this is that unlike every pawn shop and second-hand dealer, art galleries and dealers do not have to be licensed in any way, shape or form. So there is no way of implementing at the moment, some kind of control on that. Research to enable interrogation of police data and records. Well, I'm almost about ready to give up on that. The insurance companies are my next target. And I do have the name of somebody that somebody we had lunch with gave me, and so he's going to be on my list as well. And this is absolutely imperative that we break the nexus of this circle of art crime and inaction by being able to interrogate properly. And I'd like to acknowledge the support of the recently retired Commissioner Dave Owen and Paul Skuratowski's superior, Greg Newbury, the police. In that, without that, we wouldn't have been able to get to stage 1, even though I'm still struggling to get to stage 3. Thank you, everybody.